That is how Nintendo ruined gaming. Hi guys, I wanted to talk to you about how Nintendo ruined gaming and why they hate their fans. But we need to go back to the start of Nintendo's story. It all starts in 1889, over 100 years ago. Pretty impressive. Mr. Yamauchi started a company called Nintendo that focused on giving you quality handmade Hanafuda playing cards, which the playing cards did quite well. But many years later, Mr. Yamauchi decides to make his grandson the president of the company. And Mr. Yamauchi's grandson decides he's going to work with Disney so he can print Disney characters on the cards, which did quite well as he sold over 600,000 copies in just the first year, which means that he was a genius in the marketing business. And a couple years later, Nintendo starts falling in popularity, being outsold by TVs, which means that the Yamauchi family couldn't make a living. Or could they? As they started making toys, taxicabs, vacuum cleaners, and love hotels? Alright. Let's move to the next part, because as years went on, so did Nintendo. Because they made a game console in 1977 and was called the Color TV game, and it came with Donkey Kong, which did quite well, selling 3 million units, which is good, but it was only sold in Japan, and Nintendo knew it could do way better if they moved the location of where it was being sold in. So in 1983, Nintendo decides to make a family computer, which in Japan was called the Nintendo Famicom, which was very popular in Japan, selling 20 million units, which is super good for a business that was just getting 3 million units sold just a few years ago. Then Nintendo moves their product to America and renamed it the Entertainment System, which sold over 30 million units. That's insane, especially for the 1980s. But as consoles are getting more powerful, so did Nintendo's consoles. As in 1996, Nintendo released a new product called the N64, which was a very good product, and a bunch of nerds, me included, would agree upon the fact that most N64 games hold up today and still are some of the most greatest games. So when you show me that 800 polygon model of Mario, I just think to myself of how much of an establishment Nintendo made in this era. But as years go on, so does hardware. So Nintendo worked on a product they are very proud of, and it was called the Nintendo Gamecube, which introduced more realism and higher polygon count that aren't really noticeable. But the Gamecube had amazing games like Wind Waker, Luigi's Mansion, and Super Mario Sunshine. But I'm not really going to go into much detail as nothing really important happened around this era of gaming. So we're going to skip to 2006, as this is Nintendo's futuristic stage, and most of the products they released at this time were very weird. And when consumers bought the Wii, they found out it was a very weird product. But the Wii had something most other consoles couldn't do, and that was backwards compatibility. And they had quite a weird way of backwards compatibility. It uses mostly emulation, which introduces the Virtual Console. Now, with the Virtual Console came many games from different generations. I'll only name 3, but if you want to learn more, I'll link the Wikipedia in the description. But it goes from the NES, the N64, and up to the Sega Genesis, which you can imagine is a pretty big selection. You can also play Sega games, but the backwards compatibility doesn't end there, as early releases of the Wii also allowed you to play Gamecube games, which is very cool because this was true backwards compatibility, and it brought so much more to the console. But you people might be wondering how this ruined gaming. I know, I'm getting there, because the year is 2017, and Nintendo released the Nintendo Switch, which had many problems, and I'll list off a few. You can't use the stand while the Switch is charging, the stand is horrible, the screen only renders at 720p, the graphics chip was also outdated before the Switch initially launched, and the Joy-Cons tend to drift, which means that the Switch has quite a few problems. And on top of that, Nintendo knew about these problems and chose not to fix them. And on top of the Joy-Cons drifting, iFixit took it upon themselves to make a whole ad dedicated to the Joy-Con drift on the Switch, and how to fix it.
Hold the Joy-Con with the charging rail facing away from you, and open it like a book. Just don't try and fully separate it because 2 cables connect the 2 pieces. Use a spudger to gently pry the battery connector straight up.
Which means that Nintendo's fanbase can make smarter decisions than them. But 4 years later, Nintendo re-released the Switch with a larger screen, better stand, enhanced audio, and an Ethernet port. But one thing they forgot, which means they still don't care, is to fix the Joy-Con drift, which people have only been complaining about for 5 years. And they also forgot to upgrade the hardware in the Switch, which means that it still has 4 gigabytes of RAM and still has a graphics chip from 2015, a chip that's almost 6 years old as of now. And with games that weren't originally made for the Switch, for example, Fortnite, Hello Neighbor, and Apex Legends, run at 30 FPS while looking like garbage. Meaning that you might as well get an Xbox or a PlayStation because those will probably treat you better. And even last generation Xbox and PlayStation will treat you better than the Switch has to offer right now. And with the OLED screen, OLED has the potential to burn in as the screen doesn't have a backlight, but every single individual pixel has its own light, which means that it brings me to my next part. Emulation, which is very profound in gaming and very interesting on how it works. But Nintendo thinks that third-party emulation is illegal, which it's not, and with that, Nintendo has shut down many events over the years. For example, there was a Smash Bros. Tournament which was going to get canceled because of COVID reasons. They were going to emulate the games they could play online. The tournament could still happen, but remember what I said earlier about Nintendo. Yeah, they shut down the whole tournament because of emulation, which sucks. It's 2019 and Nintendo is releasing an emulation product for the first time in a long time. And it's called Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which is very poorly ported. And let me get into some details. Super Mario 64 had AI upscale textures, and it was only for the icons, so obviously they could have just remade it at a higher resolution. And with Super Mario Sunshine did a lot of good things, but if you use the official GameCube controller on the game, the triggers don't work as intended, which shouldn't be too hard to do. As with Super Mario Galaxy, it also had terrible controls, just like Super Mario Sunshine, which made you had to constantly reset the gyro for Galaxy, which also brings me to my next part. And this part has to do with the fans. Now, the fans of Nintendo are very loyal, even while being oppressed by Nintendo. So you can imagine the things they would do for the company out of love. For example, Metroid 2. Now, Metroid 2 is an old game, probably double the age of what most of you guys right now, as it's 31 years old. With this game came a fan developer who goes by Dr. M64, and he made a fan remake of Metroid 2, which was called AM2R, and it looked like it had promise. But all good things must come to an end, as Nintendo shut it down. But I guarantee if it was Sega, they would have hired the guy, as he proves that he has passion for coding, unlike other people. Hint, hint, the yandere dev. But for another example, someone remade Super Mario 64 in Unreal Engine, and it looked super promising. And when I say that, I mean it, because it looked so good. And it had amazing graphics, textures, remodeling, etc. And it looked like it was made by a AAA developer company, but it was made by one guy. That's crazy. But Nintendo also decided that it was a good idea to shut it down. And why is obvious. They clearly hate their fans and ruined fan work, as they believe that it's not good for anyone of any age to be inspired by work. Which, if you ask literally any director of a film, they would say inspiration is how movies get stitched together perfectly. But remember, Nintendo enjoys oppressing and brainwashing their fans, which means that in the future, Nintendo is looking dark. We can fix this. If we flood a Nintendo's business email telling them to fix their issues, then maybe it can make Nintendo just a little bit better. But don't get your hopes up, as they are not reliable, because that is how Nintendo ruined gaming. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, I would totally appreciate a like, as it helps out the channel a ton. And if you loved this video, I would appreciate a subscribe, as it helps out the channel even more and reach a larger audience, as I'm doing a competition with my brother to see who can get the most likes and subscribers by the end of the year, and whoever does wins. So thank you and bye.